Starting with a trimmed, faced-off block, we're ready to do some thick sectioning. This is the knife holder, and we're going to be inserting a histological diamond knife from Diatome. And as we put that in there, we want to make sure that it's nice and tight. So with ultramicrotomy, we tend to tighten things up a little bit more. All knives have an offset so that the back of the knife does not interface with the back of the block as it passes, and that's called the clearance angle. So as I loosen this up, the clearance angle you can see is rotated, and then I'm going to set that. Diatome has 6 degrees. With glass knives you might use 4 degrees. When I'm in this stage, I also like to set my knife arc at 0 degrees. That will change the side-to-side sectioning of the block. If I had at 0 degrees when I faced off, that way I don't have to do quite so much alignment in our next step. As we look at the ultramicrotome, I'm going to put our knife specimen chuck into the arm, and that's what we just had in there to do the facing off. And I'm going to adjust the specimen arc to 0 as well. As I put that in there, and now also remember that when you put that in there, the numbers should be up. If they're rotated 180 degrees, it's okay as long as you keep them the same all the time. We tighten that up and make sure that everything is secure. As I push the knife in, I'm going to put it into a certain level and get my specimen at the right level so that I get a good relationship of putting the knife in so that we don't run the knife into the block. I tighten that up and make sure that everything is tight. As I look at the front, there's our knife arc again, and that determines the side-to-side sectioning of our block face. The specimen arc up here determines the top to bottom, so we would like to get everything as flat as possible so that the specimen is oriented to the knife. As I do that, I'm going to get it in focus and then rotate my block so that the leading edge of the block is parallel to the knife edge. And we can see that it is a little bit closer on the left-hand side than it is on the right-hand side, in that it's a wedge. Sometimes it's very difficult to see at low magnification. You might need to go higher magnification. Now when you do this, I always have my knife retracted from the block face, so we don't want it, when we make an adjustment, we don't run the knife into the block face. And now that I'm closer, you can see that it is off. And so I'm going to back up again and rotate my knife a little bit more to the right-hand side to try to get that shadow, the reflection, more even across the block face. This alignment procedure often requires several iterative steps, so don't be quick to try to start sectioning. As we make more adjustments to my knife arc, we can see that as I do that, now that reflection is being very even, and that's good. As we get closer, I'm using the fine advanced knob so that the coarse doesn't drive the knife into the block face. As I look at it now, it's nice and parallel, but as I move my block up and down now, notice how the reflection gets thicker, and that indicates that my block face is farther away at the top than it is at the bottom, and so that is my specimen arc. So as I adjust my specimen arc, all I need to do is do minor alignments and adjusting the block face and determine whether my reflection stays stationary or does it appear to move? Is it the same thickness? And I'm just doing that very carefully, up and down a little bit, so that we can get a good idea that the block face is parallel to this knife arc. And again, I'm using the fine advancement because I want to be very careful that I don't run my knife into the block face. Now that that's done, I want to set my sectioning window. And I do that by bringing my block down to where I would like the sectioning speed to go, and then move it down a little bit more to the below the knife, and that's where I'd like to have it end. And that's the distance that it travels at whatever sectioning speed you have. I'm going to be using 2 millimeters per second. We're ready to put water in the knife, and I'm doing this a little closer than I normally would so that it's in view. I overfill the boat to a degree with water, and we'll notice that oftentimes the water doesn't get right up to the knife. Even though that is hydrophilic, the resin that anchors the knife into the boat is always a little bit hydrophobic. And so we have that area. So what I do is take my eyelash manipulator, get it in the water, and just run it across very carefully, not touching the edge of the knife, just running it across the face, the back of the knife, or the front of the knife in different perspective. Now that I have the water up there, notice how I can see through clear to the bottom. There's too much water in there, so I'm going to draw some water out, and as I draw that out, you'll see that nice silver reflection in the water, and that's the section you want to work with. I'm going to check my settings. I have it currently set at 1.5 millimeters per second, and I have a variety of different thicknesses and speeds. I'm going to use my thick sectioning, which is a 1/2 micron thick, and notice that when I pushed that, it started to blink because it's saying you're sectioning a thick section, so you want to be careful. I'm going to use 2 millimeters per second for my cutting speed, and that's that cutting window that we just set. Now that I have everything set, I'm ready to cut. So I push the cut button, and you can see that the handle that represents the specimen arc goes and slows down during my cutting window. And we have sections coming off. They should be nice and iridescent. While that's cutting, I'm going to add some water to my slide, and these slides have little circles, so that's nice so you can always identify where your sections are. When I pick these up, I take an eyelash manipulator and place it underneath the section. It wraps around there like a blanket on a clothesline, and then place it on top and draw my eyelash out. I will generally do 3 to 4 sections per drop, and that way then you have a number of areas or sections to look at. There we go. I'm going to put them on the hot plate now and dry them out. That depends on how much water you have. I never get the temperature too high, otherwise the stain, the water could boil, making bubbles in the section, and then the stain would dry out too quickly. I only ever stain one circle at a time in case something happens, and that only needs to stay on there for about a minute. We don't want to let the stain dry on the section, otherwise a precipitate forms that really doesn't wash off well. So we want to make sure that all of the stain is washed off completely, otherwise if it dries there then it will interfere with the section and it could stain over the top of the section. So we rinse that off well, and I'm going to put it back on the hot plate to dry. When it's dry, it's ready to look at under the light microscope and determine my region of interest. We can look at whether the fixation is good from the light microscope at the light microscope level, and then if I have to trim down to a specific area of interest, I'm all ready to do that.